Around 2 weeks ago, I made a video about my under 1 megabyte sandbox game. In said video, I asked you, the audience, for ideas for me to implement into my game, and you guys delivered. I've collected a total of 21 suggestions. Here's me implementing them. But first, there's few bugs we need to fix from 2 weeks ago. After uploading the previous videos, the first thing I would implement was rocks into the game, which you can pick up by walking over them. After implementing them, the first problem came apparent. Whenever you pick up rocks, they immediately get added to your third slot. The reason for this was how I executed the function which dealt with picking items up. This function places the picked up items in fixed slots. We only have 2 items for now, wood and rock. They would always go to the second slot, and rocks always get added to the third slot. The solution here was to make the pickup function more robust. Every time we execute the function, we need to run through the inventory slots until we find the first free slot, or until we find the first slot which matches the item we just picked up, which would in turn stack the items. After making the pickup function more robust, the second bug would rear its head out. For some unknown reason, whenever the first free slot in your inventory was selected by you and you tried to pick up a rock, the rock would simply not get picked up. This bug would have me stunned for a little while, until I would take a look at the code. Looking at the code, I would have my Jimmy Neutron brain blast moment. Let me explain. Each time the player moves, we run 2 functions, one for picking items up and the other for placing them down. The bug was occurring because we would first run the pickup function, which would pick up the item, and right after the place down function, which would place the item back down once more, creating the illusion that the item was never picked up in the first place. The solution? We simply reverse the order in which the functions are run. We first run the place down function and second the pickup function. The third and the final issue was with Executioner. Executioner is the name of the browser we constructed in the last video. The way Executioner works is it uses a URL we provide to it to access our game files. The URL I provide to it is a location of the game folder, starting from the drive it's on. The URL I've written here does work on my computer, but the problem is that you might have the game on an entirely different drive. So to ensure that our browser always manages to find the game folder, we need to not start searching from the drive, but rather from our browser's folder itself. Now we can start tackling your suggestions. Number 1. The user, Bacho697, suggested to center the game. This was relatively simple to accomplish, but definitely an improvement to the game. Number 2 and 3. Some users actually suggested similar types of ideas. For example, the users Randomnistronic and Dominic Barrasso suggested adding one more line of numbers below the inventory to display the quantities of items. This was quite simple as well, since we already have an array which holds the item amounts. All that left for us to do was to just display those numbers. Oh, and also I colored these numbers with a slightly darker shade of white to make them stand out from the inventory slots. Suggestion number 4. The user Chronos Titans Anthem suggestion was to be able to pluck seeds from trees, which you can then plant to regrow trees, making wood a renewable resource. The way I went about implementing this feature was by, at the beginning of the game, making every tree either a normal brown color or a darker maroon color, and every time you go up to a tree with a darker color and move in its direction, you get a seed, which you can plant, and in about 10ish seconds it turns into a tree. After implementing the seeds, I encountered a rather peculiar exploit. There are situations when items don't stack, and you know how there's an X and it starts with an A, and seeds start with... yeah. Anyways, number 5. The user, Canaboy-Aromas9659, suggests making the reverse letters change colors between different shades of blue, so it gives a flowing style of an effect. The way we can do this is by making a variable, and next by adding to it the tiles that make up the river. After identifying the river tiles, we just write logic, which assigns each of the tiles a random shade of blue every few seconds. The effect is very subtle, but it does give the world a tad bit more life. Number 6 and 7. Users ZNG3478 and Profile Hazards suggested the idea of using not only letters but symbols as well. Actually, the user Profile Hazards also gave the idea of spawning fish in the rivers and animating them by alternating between these 2 Unicodes. I actually really like this idea, so props to you, Profile Hazards. First thing I did was update the font with the 2 fish sprites. Next, I tried to spawn them on random river tiles, but when I did, these weird symbols appeared. Long story short, I solved the issue by including these lines. Now that we spawned them, let's animate them and give them the ability to swim around as well. Whoa, is it just me, or a flock of fish swimming around in a sea of ASCII characters is pretty freaking mesmerizing. Also, I vividly remember banging my head listening to Pop Sim by Blur while implementing this. Next, number 8, 9 and 10. Users, Unix Zone, Compatch Dev and Enzyme Game suggested for me to add some type of an enemy to the game. My first idea was to add goblins, inspired by my cock base. Ways these little guys would work is if you get in the radius between them and 5 blocks, they would chase you until they hit a tree or wood. But due to a programming quirk, once you got out of their way, they would still continue moving in that direction. This was unintentional, but I quite liked it. It reminded me sort of how bulls behave. So I decided to transition goblins to bulls, which technically counts as me implementing the following suggestions as well. Number 11 and 12. Users Sagewal3516 and Hungry Duckling 1345 suggest that I add animals to the game. And I don't know if you guys know this, but bulls are animals. I know, quite a cool little fact. The next suggestion is quite a big one. Number 13, 14, 15 and 16. The user Tomato95 suggests for there to be an open world implemented. And users TypoCat, NCGI and Ruax advocated for there to be some sort of a cave in the game. Alright guys, I hear you all loud and clear. Let's add biomes to the game. First we need to detect every time the player moves out of the world. Next we need to teleport the player to the opposite side of the world, creating an effect that the player has moved out of the previous biome and entered a new one. Then we need to reload the game, but before we do so we have to save some data. First we need to save the player's position, next the items in our inventory, next the item amounts, and finally we need to save a randomly generated number. This number will dictate what biome to load. I've managed to come up with 7 different biomes so far. The desert, icy wasteland, ocean, cave. The last 3 are what I call variational biomes. There's a normal forest, weathered forest, and forest. If you guys have any more ideas on what biomes I should add, feel free to comment them down in the description. After implementing everything I've just mentioned, the game has risen from 15.1 to an astounding 40.7 kilobytes. These are all the suggestions I've added to the game so far. You guys might be asking though, what about the rest of the 5 suggestions? Well, I've shelved 2 suggestions to explore them in the future. One of them is a suggestion of the user Mohanad El Sabag 9534, I hope I'm saying that right, which is to add accessories to the game. And the second of the user, official Lucas37, who said verbatim, you should add a mode where instead of letters it's just chord blocks so that it's more visible, which does sound interesting, so I'll make sure to keep it in mind. The remaining 3 are suggestions which sadly I wasn't fully able to understand. I'll make sure to show them on the screen, so if you guys are curious, be sure to pause and read them. And I'm pretty sure that brings us to the end. I would like to say thank you to every single person who left a suggestion on the last video. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to every single person who watched, liked or commented on the last video as well. It's doing extremely well, which is really amazing to see. So really my heart goes out to all of you. Thank you so much. Oh, what was that sound? Looks like there's a new comment on the video. I don't know, try make it 3D. Well, since you asked so nicely, sure.
Y'all ready to get funky?
The most important part of dance is music. So now let us listen to the music and identify the beats.
1, 2, 3.
But that was too soft.